When Jimin's rage erupts over Jungkook's secret kiss with an idol exposed on Discord, HYBE stocks plummet. Jungkook hints at marriage, what's next? Did you really think you could hide this from me? Jimin's voice echoed sharply against the glass walls of the studio, his eyes blazing with fury as he slammed his phone onto the table. The screen flickered, frozen on a Discord screenshot, an image of Jungkook, lips locked with a mysterious idol, her face partially obscured but unmistakably familiar. The timestamp was fresh, too fresh. Jimin's hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. He was livid. Jungkook stood across the room, his gaze steady but his jaw clenched. His fingers were still coiled around the neck of his water bottle, the plastic crumpling under the pressure. The room hung heavy with tension, the silence vibrating with unspoken accusations. Jimin, Jungkook finally spoke, his voice measured and calm, "It's not what it looks like." Jimin laughed bitterly, the sound cutting through the stillness. "Not what it looks like? You think I'm blind? It's right there for the world to see. Do you even know what you've done?" Jungkook's eyes flickered with something unreadable before he looked away, jaw tightening. It was a mistake. One moment, it wasn't supposed to be public. A mistake. Jimin's fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles whitening. HYB stocks are crashing, the fans are losing their minds, and you're calling this a mistake? Do you even understand what you've risked? Jungkook set the bottle down, its crumpled surface crackling against the table. "I'm handling it," he said firmly, but Jimin took a step forward, eyes blazing. "Handling it?" His voice rose, sharp with disbelief. "By talking about marriage? Have you lost your mind? You think this is some kind of fan service? This isn't a game, Jungkook." The younger man's gaze snapped back to Jimin, fire meeting fire. "Maybe it's time we stopped pretending," Jungkook spat out, his voice finally breaking its calm. "Maybe it's time I live for myself. I'm tired of being a puppet, Jimin. Aren't you?" Jimin faltered, just for a moment. His breath caught in his throat, the words hanging between them like shattered glass. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his expression. But just as quickly, it hardened again. "Is that what you think this is? A prison?" Jimin's voice was softer now, almost broken. "You think you can just throw everything away? You think you can watch everything we built burn just because you're tired?" Jungkook didn't flinch. He didn't blink. His gaze was iron. "If burning is what it takes to be free," he said slowly, "then maybe it's worth it." The silence returned, heavier than before. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the battle raging within those glass walls. But in that moment, Jimin knew something had shifted, something irreversible. He took a deep breath, forcing his hands to steady. "Then you better be ready," Jimin whispered, his voice taut with unspoken promises. "Because this isn't just about you anymore. This is war." Without another word, Jimin grabbed his phone off the table, the Discord screenshot flashing for just a second before the screen went dark. He didn't look back as he walked out of the room, the door slamming shut behind him with a force that reverberated through the walls. Jungkook watched him leave, his fists still clenched, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his eyes drifting back to the empty studio. The silence felt like an accusation, lingering and unyielding. And for the first time, he wondered if Jimin was right. If maybe, just maybe, he had set fire to something far bigger than himself. The rain pelted the windows of the HYBE building with relentless fury, streaking down the glass in jagged lines as if the sky itself was cracking open. Inside the boardroom, tension simmered beneath the surface like a bomb waiting for its timer to run out. The room was filled with executives, their faces pale and tight, whispers darting between clenched teeth. At the head of the table sat Bang Si-hyuk, his hands folded neatly, eyes sharp as a hawk. Jungkook sat across from him, flanked by his manager and two PR representatives, their faces lined with sleeplessness. The scandal had hit every news outlet overnight, splattered across headlines like bloodstains. Jungkook kisses mysterious idol on Discord. HYBE stocks plummet by 54%. Speculation ran wild, names were thrown into the air like confetti, Minji, Taehyung, even Yuna from HYBE. No one knew for sure, and HYBE wasn't talking. Si-hyuk leaned forward, fingers steepled. His gaze locked on Jungkook, and for a long moment, the room held its breath. "Do you have any idea," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "what kind of fire you've lit?" Jungkook met his eyes, unwavering. "I do," he replied simply. The tension crackled, electric and raw. Si-hyuk's eyes narrowed, calculating. "Then explain it to me, because I seem to be missing the part where this was a good idea." His tone was venom-laced, but Jungkook didn't flinch. "It wasn't supposed to get out," Jungkook admitted, his voice steady. "But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen." A murmur spread around the table, hushed and frantic. One of the PR representatives, a woman with sharp eyes and even sharper words, leaned forward. "So you're admitting it? Publicly?" Jungkook's gaze flickered to her, then back to Taehyung. I'm admitting that I'm done pretending, he said firmly. I'm not going to lie to the fans or to myself anymore. Taehyung leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping slowly against the table. So that's it? You think you can just walk away from this? From the group? From everything we've built? Jungkook's expression hardened. I'm not walking away, he clarified, his voice dropping to a razor-sharp whisper. I'm stepping forward. The room fell silent. The rain outside hammered harder against the glass, like it was trying to drown out the tension coiling through the air. Finally, Taehyung sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. You've left me with no choice, he murmured. We'll have to control the narrative. Damage control first, and then. He trailed off, his gaze slicing back to Jungkook. We'll deal with the consequences. Jungkook didn't respond. He simply leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling for just a moment as if seeking solace from the storm. Outside the room, Jimin was pacing. His footsteps echoed off the marble floors, sharp and insistent. His hands were jammed into his pockets, shoulders tense. He had tried calling Jungkook a dozen times, but the younger man hadn't picked up. His texts had gone unanswered. He wasn't sure if it was defiance or fear, but either way it was driving him insane. Hyung, a voice called from behind him. He turned sharply to see Taehyung approaching, his expression clouded with concern. You've been out here for an hour. What are you doing? Jimin ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Waiting for him to finish, he muttered. I need to talk to him. Taehyung stepped closer, his eyes searching Jimin's face. Are you okay? Jimin looked away, jaw tightening. Do I look okay? Taehyung didn't flinch at the harshness in his voice. Instead, he leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. No, he said simply. You look like you're about to explode. Jimin laughed, short and bitter. Maybe I am. Taehyung studied him for a moment, his gaze softening. Look, he said gently, maybe just take a breath? Jungkook's always been stubborn. You know that. Jimin's fists clenched at his sides. This isn't just stubbornness, he snapped. This is reckless. He's risking everything. For what? Some fleeting moment of freedom. Taehyung shrugged, his eyes darkening. Maybe that's exactly why he did it, he murmured. Because for him it wasn't fleeting. Jimin's eyes snapped to his, a flicker of confusion sparking. What are you talking about? Taehyung hesitated just for a moment. His eyes flickered to the boardroom door, still sealed shut, voices muffled inside. You didn't hear? Hear what? Jimin's voice was sharp, almost desperate. Taehyung straightened up, his gaze steady. Jungkook's been talking about marriage, he said quietly. He mentioned it to the staff this morning. Jimin's breath hitched, his heart slamming against his ribs. Marriage? He repeated, voice cracking slightly. To who? Taehyung's silence was answer enough. Jimin staggered back a step, his hand going to the wall for support. No, he whispered, shaking his head. He wouldn't, he couldn't. Taehyung's expression was grim. I thought you knew. Jimin's eyes burned with disbelief, his chest heaving. No, he repeated more firmly this time. This is just. It's just a rumor. It has to be. Taehyung's gaze softened, filled with something that looked like pity. I don't think it is, Hyung. Jimin's head spun, the hallway tilting dangerously. He pushed off the wall, stumbling toward the boardroom door. I need to talk to him, he whispered almost to himself. I need to. But before he could reach the handle, the door swung open and Jungkook stepped out. His face was unreadable, eyes dark and guarded. He stopped short when he saw Jimin, his expression flickering with something too quick to name. Jungkook, Jimin breathed, voice heavy with desperation. Is it true? Are you really going to marry her? Jungkook's gaze held his for a long moment, and in his eyes, Jimin saw something break, like glass shattering in slow motion. Finally, Jungkook nodded. Yes, he said simply. Jimin staggered back, his hand flying to his mouth. He stared at Jungkook, disbelief and hurt crashing over him in waves. Why, he whispered, voice barely audible. Why would you do this? Jungkook's eyes were hard, unyielding. Because I'm tired of pretending, he replied. And I'm not going to apologize for that. Jimin's breath came in ragged bursts, his vision blurring. He took a step forward, his voice cracking. And what about us? He demanded, the words slipping out before he could stop them. What about everything we've been through? Does that mean nothing to you? Jungkook hesitated, his eyes flickering with something like regret. But just as quickly, it vanished, replaced with cold resolve. It means everything, he whispered, almost too soft to hear. But this is my choice. Jimin's shoulders slumped, his hands falling to his sides. He stared at Jungkook, searching for something, anything to hold on to. But there was nothing. Nothing except the storm raging between them, too fierce to be ignored. Jungkook stepped past him without another word, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Jimin didn't move, couldn't move. He just stood there, staring after him, feeling the weight of the world collapse in his chest. Outside, the rain pounded harder, drowning out the silence that followed. The city buzzed with whispers. Every cafe, every street corner, every bustling subway car carried murmurs of Jungkook's confession and the enigmatic idol that had captured his heart. Social media was a wildfire, threads and posts exploding with theories, accusations, and frantic speculations. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Jungkook marriage, hashtag HYBE crisis, and most controversially, hashtag where is Jimin? Jimin hadn't been seen for days. His last appearance was that confrontation outside the boardroom, sharp words and shattered illusions. Since then he had disappeared, his social media gone dark, and even the members hadn't heard a word. Jungkook's hand hovered over his phone for the 100th time that day. His thumb hesitated over Jimin's name in his contacts, the familiar heart emoji next to it making his chest tighten. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, his hand curling into a fist. He tossed the phone onto his bed and dragged his hands through his hair, frustration simmering beneath his skin. A knock at the door snapped him back to reality. He straightened, muscles tensing instinctively. Yeah? The door cracked open, revealing Namjoon, his expression cautious but unyielding. We need to talk, he said simply. Jungkook nodded, stepping aside as Namjoon entered the room, his presence heavy with unspoken judgment. Namjoon closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Jungkook. Are you gonna tell me what the hell is going on, or do I have to read it on Twitter like everyone else? Namjoon's voice was calm, too calm, and that made Jungkook's stomach twist. Jungkook leaned back against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. You already know, he replied, voice steady. I'm not hiding it. Namjoon raised an eyebrow, his gaze sharp. You're not hiding it, but you're not explaining it either, he shot back. I've got fans screaming at me online, investors pulling out of projects, and Jimin. Christ, Jungkook, what the hell happened with Jimin? Jungkook's eyes darkened, jaw tightening. That's between me and him, he replied, voice dropping. Is it? Namjoon pushed off the door, his expression hardening. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like it's between you, him, and the entire damn world right now. Jungkook's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I'm done pretending, he said firmly. I'm done living my life for everyone else. This is what I want. Namjoon stared at him, disbelief flashing across his features. You want this? You want chaos? You want our fans turning on each other, the company in shambles, and Jimin. Don't bring him into this, Jungkook cut in, his voice sharp and defensive. Namjoon laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. Don't bring him into this, he repeated. He's already in it, Jungkook. Whether you like it or not. Jungkook pushed off the desk, stepping forward until there were only inches between them. I'm not apologizing for living my life, he said quietly, voice shaking with restraint. I'm not going to sacrifice my happiness just because it's inconvenient for everyone else. Namjoon's gaze softened just for a moment. And what about his happiness, he asked, voice dropping to a whisper. Did you even think about that? Jungkook's expression wavered, the mask cracking for just a second before it hardened again. He made his choice, he replied, turning away. Namjoon's shoulders slumped, his hand coming up to rub the back of his neck. He stared at Jungkook's back for a long moment, the weight of unspoken words pressing between them. Finally, he sighed. I just hope you know what you're doing, he murmured, turning toward the door. Because if you don't, there's no coming back from this. The door clicked shut, leaving Jungkook alone with the echo of Namjoon's words. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, trying to steady the storm raging in his chest. But it was no use. His hands were still shaking. The sound of his phone vibrating broke the silence, the screen flashing with a name that made his heart stop. Jimin. He stared at it, breath-catching, fingers hovering over the screen. Finally, he slid his thumb across, bringing the phone to his ear. Jungkook, Jimin's voice came through, strained and brittle. There was a pause, filled only with the sound of shallow breathing. I'm coming over. Jungkook's heart stuttered. Now? Now, Jimin replied firmly. We need to talk. I'm done waiting. Before Jungkook could respond, the line went dead. He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the screen, his heart hammering wildly. He swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the device as he braced himself. Half an hour later, the buzzer rang. Jungkook moved on autopilot, his limbs stiff as he pressed the button to unlock the door. He paced the living room, hands running through his hair, nerves fraying with every second. Finally, there was a knock at the door. He opened it without hesitation. Jimin stood there, drenched from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead, eyes shadowed with fatigue and something deeper, something raw and jagged. His hands were shoved into his coat pockets, shoulders hunched as if bracing for impact. Jungkook stepped aside silently and Jimin entered, dripping water onto the hardwood floors. He didn't bother taking off his shoes or shaking off his coat. He just stood there, staring at Jungkook with an intensity that made the younger man's breath hitch. "You're marrying her," Jimin stated, voice flat and unyielding. It wasn't a question. Jungkook nodded slowly. "I am." Jimin's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing. "And that's it? You weren't even going to tell me?" "I had to hear it from Taehyung. It wasn't." "Don't," Jimin cut him off, stepping forward. His eyes were wild, his fists clenched at his sides. "Don't you dare say it wasn't supposed to happen. Because it did. You made that choice. You made it without me." Jungkook's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "I didn't think." "That's right," Jimin snapped, voice cracking. "You didn't think. About me. About us. About anything." Jungkook flinched, his hands shaking slightly. "What do you want me to say?" he whispered, voice hoarse. "I want you to tell me why," Jimin demanded, his voice rising. "I want you to look me in the eyes and tell me why you're doing this. Why you're throwing everything away." Jungkook's eyes flickered with pain, his fists clenching. "Because I'm tired, Jimin," he replied, voice breaking. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being something I'm not." "And what are you?" Jimin spat, eyes blazing. "Because right now I don't recognize you." Jungkook's gaze hardened, his jaw setting. "Maybe you never did," he shot back. Jimin's breath caught, his fists unclenching slowly. His expression crumpled just for a moment before it smoothed over into something unreadable. "Maybe you're right," he whispered, voice soft and broken. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Rain pounded against the windows, the city outside oblivious to the storm raging within those four walls. Finally, Jimin took a step back, his eyes shimmering with something dangerously close to tears. "I hope she's worth it," he murmured, voice trembling. "I hope this freedom is worth everything you're giving up." Jungkook's expression faltered, but he didn't speak. He just watched as Jimin turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing painfully in the silence. The door shut softly behind him, leaving Jungkook standing alone, hands shaking, heart splintering. Outside, Jimin stepped into the rain, tilting his head back as the droplets mingled with the tears streaking down his face. He closed his eyes, letting the water wash over him, cleansing him of everything he couldn't say. But even as the rain fell, even as the storm raged, Jimin knew the fire wasn't out. Not yet. The city lights shimmered outside Jungkook's apartment window, glowing with a surreal intensity against the midnight sky. He stood by the glass, one hand pressed flat against the cool surface, his breath fogging up the view. Below, Seoul pulsed with life, cars threading through traffic, neon signs flickering with promises of escape, strangers brushing past each other with stories untold. He wondered distantly if anyone out there knew what he was going through. If anyone understood the price of freedom. His phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a series of missed calls. Namjoon. Taehyung. Even Junggi had called, his name flashing across the screen like a ghost from another life. But not Jimin. Jimin had stayed silent. Jungkook's jaw clenched, his hand curling into a fist against the window pane. He wasn't sure if it was pride or fear that kept him from reaching out, but the distance was growing, stretching taut and thin like the fragile string of a kite caught in the wind. He knew it would snap eventually, knew that when it did, there would be nothing left but ashes. He pushed away from the window, stalking toward the kitchen where an unopened bottle of whiskey sat on the counter. He grabbed it, his fingers trembling slightly as he unscrewed the cap. The amber liquid sloshed into the glass, the sound sharp and harsh against the silence. He downed it in one go, the burn scorching his throat, chasing away the chill that had settled in his bones. Before he could pour another, there was a knock at his door, loud, insistent. He frowned, setting the bottle down and striding toward the entryway. When he pulled it open, Taehyung stood there, his face shadowed and grim, eyes glinting with something fierce and unyielding. "We need to talk," Taehyung said without preamble, pushing past Jungkook and stepping into the apartment. His coat was drenched, droplets of rain splattering onto the hardwood floors as he brushed past. Jungkook closed the door slowly, turning to face him. "You couldn't call first?" Taehyung snorted, shaking the rain from his hair. "Would you have picked up?" Jungkook didn't answer. He crossed his arms over his chest, leaning back against the door. "What do you want, Taehyung?" Taehyung glanced around the apartment, his eyes sharp and searching. "I want to know what the hell is going on with you," he replied. "And don't give me that bullshit about freedom and living your life. I want the truth." Jungkook stiffened, his expression hardening. "I told you already," he said tightly. "I'm done living for everyone else. I'm doing this for me." "For you," Taehyung repeated, his voice low and disbelieving. "And what about Jimin? What about everything you two had? Are you just throwing it away?" Jungkook's eyes flashed with anger. "That's not your business," he snapped. Taehyung stepped forward, his expression fierce. "It is when I have to watch him tear himself apart because of you," he shot back. "You don't see him, Jungkook. You don't see what you did to him. Jungkook flinched, but his gaze remained steady. He made his choice, he said quietly. He could have stayed. He could have tried. Taehyung laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and jagged. Tried? He was begging you to stay. And you walked away. You chose her. Jungkook's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. I chose myself, he corrected, voice shaking. Is that what you tell yourself? Taehyung's eyes burned with accusation. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just ran away. Jungkook's hands slammed against the counter, the bottle of whiskey rattling from the impact. Get out, he growled, voice low and dangerous. Taehyung didn't move. His eyes locked on Jungkook's, unyielding. You think I'm scared of you right now? He whispered, stepping forward until there were mere inches between them. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. Jungkook's breath came in sharp, ragged bursts. I'm done, he said through clenched teeth. I'm done with all of this. I'm not gonna live my life pretending anymore. I'm going to marry her and I'm going to live the way I want. Taehyung's gaze flickered, his jaw tightening. And what if it's not what you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What if you're just running away because you're too scared to admit how you really feel? Jungkook's hands shook, his vision blurring with rage and something deeper, something raw and festering. He took a step back, shaking his head. You don't know anything, he whispered, voice cracking. You don't know what it's like. You don't. I don't know. Taehyung cut in, voice rising. You think I haven't watched you two for years? You think I don't see the way you look at him? The way he looks at you? Jungkook's eyes glistened, his hands shaking. Stop, he whispered. Just stop. Taehyung's expression softened just for a moment. You don't have to do this, he murmured. It's not too late, Jungkook. You can still fix this. You can still make it right. Jungkook's breath hitched, the words slicing through his defenses like shards of glass. He looked away, blinking back the burn of tears. It's too late, he whispered. I already made my choice. Taehyung took a step back, his shoulders slumping. He watched Jungkook for a long moment, eyes heavy with disappointment and something close to pity. You're wrong, he said quietly. It's never too late to fight for what you want. Jungkook didn't respond. He couldn't. The words lodged in his throat, sharp and unforgiving. He turned away, his hands braced against the counter, head bowed. He heard Taehyung sigh, heard the soft footsteps retreating toward the door. But before Taehyung left, he paused. When you're ready to stop lying to yourself, he murmured, voice soft and raw, you know where to find him. The door clicked shut, and Jungkook was alone again, the silence pressing down on him like a weight. He closed his eyes, his breath coming in shallow bursts, his hands shaking. He stayed that way for a long time, the city lights flickering outside, the whiskey bottle untouched on the counter. But his thoughts were elsewhere, tangled in memories and regrets he couldn't escape. Memories of Jimin's smile. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. The way his hand fit so perfectly in Jungkook's, like it had always been meant to be there. Jungkook opened his eyes, staring at his reflection in the window, haunted, broken, and afraid. He clenched his fists, jaw setting with determination. Maybe Taehyung was right. Maybe it wasn't too late. But the question remained, was he brave enough to try? The tension in the HYBE building was electric. Whispers filled the halls like shadows, clinging to every corner and seeping through every crack. Staff moved in hurried whispers, glancing nervously over their shoulders as if fearing that even their breaths might stir the chaos deeper. The conference rooms were locked in back-to-back meetings, executives barking orders over the phone and PR scrambling to mend the unraveling seams. But there was one name that was spoken with equal parts fear and reverence, Jimin. No one had seen him in days. Not at rehearsals, not at the studio, and certainly not at any of the scheduled public events. His social media was a wasteland, not a single update since the day he walked out of Jungkook's apartment, eyes rimmed red and voice shaking. Jungkook paced his own apartment, shadows lengthening with each step. His hand curled around his phone, thumb brushing over Jimin's contact, the familiar heart still sitting beside his name. He hadn't been able to bring himself to delete it. His thumb hovered over the call button before he cursed under his breath, tossing the phone onto the couch and running his hands through his hair. A knock shattered the silence. He turned, heart hammering, 1,000 thoughts racing through his mind. He crossed the room in quick strides and yanked open the door. It wasn't Jimin. Namjoon stood there, hands shoved into his coat pockets, eyes dark and unyielding. Jungkook stepped back instinctively and Namjoon walked in without waiting for an invitation, closing the door behind him with a deliberate click. We need to talk, Namjoon said simply, voice low and firm. Jungkook crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. I'm pretty sure we've said everything that needs saying, he replied, leaning back against the wall. Namjoon's gaze didn't waver. You think so? He asked, his voice sharp. Because last I checked, you broke one of your closest friends, threw away everything we've built, and set the world on fire for some half-baked idea of freedom. Jungkook's jaw clenched, fists curling at his sides. You don't understand, he said quietly. This isn't about you. It's not even about them. It's about me. Namjoon scoffed, stepping closer, his eyes blazing with something fierce and unyielding. You're right. It's about you. And it's about Jimin. Do you even know where he is right now? Jungkook's breath hitched, eyes flickering with something close to fear. He's probably at home, he murmured, voice shaking. He just needs time. Time? Namjoon's voice cracked like a whip. You think he just needs time? He's gone, Jungkook. Jungkook straightened, heart pounding. What do you mean, gone? Namjoon's eyes were cold, unyielding. He left. Packed his things. His apartment's empty. He's not at the studio. Not with his family. He's just gone. Jungkook felt the room spin, his hands gripping the edge of the counter for support. No, he whispered, shaking his head. He wouldn't just leave. Wouldn't he? Namjoon challenged, voice rising. After everything you put him through? After you threw him away like he was nothing? Jungkook's eyes burned with something sharp and painful. I didn't throw him away, he shot back, voice cracking. I had to do this for me. Namjoon's hands slammed against the counter, the sound reverberating through the silence. And now he's gone, he repeated, voice heavy with accusation. And you did that. You chose this. Jungkook's vision blurred, his fists shaking. He stumbled back, collapsing onto the couch, his hands dragging through his hair. Where did he go? He whispered, voice broken. Namjoon didn't move from where he stood, his eyes never leaving Jungkook's. If I knew, I wouldn't be here talking to you, he replied coldly. Jungkook's eyes snapped up, desperation bleeding through his expression. We have to find him, he said, voice trembling. We have to bring him back. Namjoon's gaze softened just for a moment. Do you even understand what you've done to him? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. This isn't something you can just fix. It's not a broken mic or a missed rehearsal. You shattered him, Jungkook. And now he's gone. Jungkook's breath came in ragged bursts, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He looked up at Namjoon, eyes glistening with tears he couldn't hold back. I didn't mean to hurt him, he whispered. I swear, I didn't. Namjoon sighed heavily, shoulders slumping. Sometimes, he murmured, voice heavy with sorrow, intention doesn't matter. Only the result. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down like a shroud. Jungkook stared at the floor, his hands trembling, his mind spiraling with 1,000 thoughts and none of them making sense. He tried to breathe, but the air felt thick and heavy like he was drowning. Where do we start? Jungkook whispered finally, voice hoarse and fragile. Namjoon's eyes met his, and for the first time that night, there was a flicker of hope. We start by finding him, he said simply. And you better pray he wants to be found. The words hung between them, sharp and unforgiving. Jungkook nodded, pushing to his feet, his legs shaking beneath him. I'm coming with you, he said firmly. Namjoon didn't argue. He just nodded, turning back toward the door. Then let's go. The drive was silent. Namjoon gripped the wheel with white-knuckled intensity, eyes locked on the road, expression hard and unreadable. Jungkook sat in the passenger seat, hands twisted together in his lap, eyes staring straight ahead but not really seeing anything. They checked Jimin's old apartment first, empty, just as Namjoon had said. His clothes were gone, the walls stripped bare. Jungkook's chest ached as he walked through the empty rooms, memories flashing behind his eyes with every step. Laughter, late-night talks, secrets whispered in the dark. All of it gone, like dust in the wind. They moved on to the cafe Jimin loved, the one with the rooftop garden where he would sometimes escape to write or just breathe. But the barista just shook her head, eyes clouded with pity. I haven't seen him, she murmured. Not for days. Jungkook thanked her quietly, his voice hollow, and followed Namjoon back out into the rain-soaked streets. They continued searching, each place more hopeless than the last. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning when the city began to stir awake that they found themselves back at HYBE, exhausted and empty-handed. Namjoon cut the engine, resting his head against the steering wheel. We'll try again tomorrow, he said quietly. Jungkook didn't respond. He just stared out the window, eyes glassy, hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. I'll find him, he whispered, voice shaking. I swear, I'll find him. Namjoon sighed but said nothing, leaving Jungkook alone with his thoughts. Jungkook stared up at the sky, dawn just beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the city in hues of gray and silver. His fists clenched tighter, jaw setting with grim determination. I'll find you, he whispered into the silence, his voice cracking. I promise, Jimin. I'll find you. The rain hadn't stopped for days. It pounded against the glass walls of HYBE like a relentless drumbeat, a constant reminder of the storm brewing both outside and within. Jungkook stood in the corner of the recording studio, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket, eyes trained on the cityscape blurred by the downpour. He hadn't slept, not properly. His mind was tangled with echoes of Jimin's voice, the soft crack in his tone, the way he had looked back just once before walking away. Namjoon had been silent for the past 2 days, retreating into his own world of studio sessions and meetings with executives trying to salvage the remnants of their reputation. But today, Namjoon appeared at the door, expression steely, eyes sharper than usual. Jungkook turned when he felt the presence behind him, his shoulders stiffening. Namjoon stepped inside, the door clicking shut with finality. "We found him," Namjoon said, his voice low and deliberate. Jungkook's breath hitched. He spun around, eyes wide and desperate. "Where?" Namjoon's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Not far. He's staying at a place downtown. Under a different name." Jungkook felt his heart slam against his ribs. Is he okay?" Namjoon's jaw tightened. "Define okay," he replied, voice clipped. "He's breathing. He's not exactly talking." Jungkook moved toward the door without hesitation, but Namjoon's hand shot out, gripping his shoulder firmly. "Wait," Namjoon commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Jungkook turned, eyes blazing. "What? Why? I need to see him." Namjoon's gaze didn't waver. "You need to think," he replied. "You barge in there and you're going to make it worse. He doesn't want to see anyone right now. Especially not you." The words hit like a punch to the gut, but Jungkook didn't back down. "I don't care," he said stubbornly. "I need to make this right." Namjoon sighed, his grip tightening. "You can't just fix this, Jungkook. Not with words. Not anymore." Jungkook's eyes glimmered with desperation. "Then what am I supposed to do? Just let him disappear?" Namjoon's expression softened just for a moment. "Maybe you need to listen first," he said quietly. "For once, just listen to what he has to say." Jungkook swallowed hard, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. "Then take me to him," he whispered. "Please." Namjoon hesitated, studying Jungkook's face as if searching for something, some sign of understanding or regret. Finally, he nodded, stepping back. "Get your coat," he said simply. Jungkook didn't waste a second. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair and followed Namjoon out into the hall, footsteps echoing off the walls. No one stopped them. The building was nearly deserted, most staff working from home after the scandal had thrown the company into chaos. The drive was silent, heavy with tension. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the lights of the city into streaks of gold and crimson. Jungkook watched it all pass by, heart hammering in his chest. He had no idea what he was going to say, how he was going to fix this. All he knew was that he had to try. They pulled up outside a small hotel tucked between towering skyscrapers. It was modest, almost unassuming, exactly the kind of place Jimin would hide if he didn't want to be found. Namjoon killed the engine, turning to face Jungkook. "He's in room 315, Namjoon said quietly. "But don't go in there expecting forgiveness. He's not ready for that. He might never be." Jungkook nodded slowly, fingers tightening around the car door handle. "I just want to talk to him," he murmured. Namjoon's eyes were heavy with something close to pity. "Good luck," he whispered. Jungkook stepped out into the rain, pulling his hood up against the downpour. He walked quickly, feet splashing through puddles, mind spinning with what he might find behind that door. The elevator ride was suffocatingly slow, every second stretching longer than the last. When the doors finally slid open, he stepped out onto the 3rd floor, the carpet beneath his feet muffling his footsteps. The number stared back at him, stark and unyielding. He hesitated, his hand hovering just above the door. His heart thundered, breath coming in shallow bursts. Finally, he knocked. There was silence. He knocked again, harder this time. "Jimin?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Still nothing. He pressed his forehead against the door, fists clenching at his sides. "Please," he whispered, voice cracking. "Just let me talk to you." The silence stretched, unbearable. Then, just as he was about to turn away, the door clicked. Jungkook's head snapped up and the door creaked open an inch. Jimin stood there, eyes shadowed and hollow, hair disheveled, lips pressed into a thin line. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared, the silence heavy and suffocating. Finally, Jimin stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," he said quietly. Jungkook moved inside, heart hammering against his ribs. The room was small, almost bare, just a bed, a desk, and a single window streaked with rain. Jimin walked to the window, his back turned, arms wrapped around himself. Jungkook swallowed hard. "Jimin, Don't," Jimin interrupted, voice brittle. "Just, don't start with apologies. I can't listen to that right now." Jungkook closed his mouth, nodding even though Jimin couldn't see him. He took a step closer. "I was just worried," he whispered. "When I heard you left, Jimin laughed, the sound hollow and sharp. You were worried, he echoed, voice cracking. That's funny. Because I thought you were busy, planning a wedding. Jungkook flinched, his hands curling into fists. It's not like that, he murmured. Jimin turned, eyes blazing. Then tell me what it's like, he shouted, voice raw and trembling. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you threw everything away for nothing. Jungkook took a step back, his eyes wide with shock. I didn't throw it away, he protested. I needed to do this for me. Jimin's laugh was sharp, almost cruel. For you, he whispered, voice shaking. And what about me? What about what we had? Was that just convenient for you? Something to pass the time. Jungkook's eyes burned, his fists shaking. It wasn't like that, he whispered fiercely. Jimin's eyes flashed with pain and something deeper, something raw and unspoken. I don't know anything anymore, he whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. They stood there, eyes locked, the rain tapping against the window like a heartbeat. Finally, Jimin looked away, shoulders slumping. You should go, he murmured. Jungkook's breath hitched, desperation clawing its way up his throat. Jimin, please. Go, Jimin repeated, voice cracking. Before I say something we can't take back. Jungkook hesitated, his feet rooted to the spot. But Jimin didn't look back. His shoulders were stiff, arms wrapped tightly around himself, shutting Jungkook out. Slowly, painfully, Jungkook turned and walked out the door, the sound of it clicking shut behind him echoing in his chest. Outside, the rain poured harder, drenching him to the bone. He didn't care. He just stood there, head tilted back, eyes closed, letting the water drown out the sound of his breaking heart. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city drenched and glistening under the pale light of dawn. A fog hung low over the streets, curling around buildings like whispered secrets. Inside HYBE's top-floor conference room, the tension was suffocating. Rows of executives sat stiffly in leather chairs, their expressions a mix of dread and barely concealed fury. At the head of the table, Bang Si-hyuk sat with his hands folded neatly before him, eyes trained on the two figures standing just inside the door, Jungkook and Namjoon. Jungkook straightened his shoulders, ignoring the burn of their gazes. His heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained stoic. Namjoon took a step forward, clearing his throat. We need to talk, he said simply. Si-hyuk's eyes narrowed, his fingers drumming softly against the polished wood of the table. I would say that's an understatement, he replied smoothly. His gaze shifted to Jungkook, voice hardening. Do you even understand the damage you've done? Jungkook met his eyes, unflinching. I understand, he replied, voice steady. But I'm not here to talk about damage control. I'm here to set things right. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room, whispers of disbelief and skepticism. Si-hyuk raised a hand, silencing them instantly. Set things right, he echoed, leaning back in his chair. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Jungkook swallowed, glancing at Namjoon, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. He took a deep breath, fists clenching at his sides. I'm calling off the engagement, he announced, his voice ringing clear through the room. The silence was deafening. Executives exchanged shocked glances, papers shuffled nervously, and Si-hyuk's eyes flashed with something dark and unyielding. Excuse me, he said slowly, voice low and dangerous. Jungkook stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. You heard me, he repeated. I'm not going through with it. It's over. Si-hyuk's hands pressed flat against the table, the tension in his knuckles stark white. Do you have any idea what kind of fallout that will cause? He asked, voice sharp as glass. You think the scandal was bad before? Wait until they find out you've walked away. Do you think the media will just let this slide? Do you think our investors will stay quiet? Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. I don't care, he said firmly. I can't keep living a lie. The whispers grew louder this time, hushed accusations and frantic speculations rippling through the room. Si-hyuk held up his hand again, silencing them with a single gesture. His eyes bore into Jungkook's, unyielding and cold. This is not just about you, he said softly, his voice deadly calm. This is about all of us. Your actions have consequences, Jungkook. And if you walk away now, you take all of us down with you. Jungkook's jaw clenched, fists shaking. Then maybe it's time we stopped pretending, he shot back. Maybe it's time we stopped sacrificing everything just to fit someone else's idea of perfect. Si-hyuk leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. You think this is about perfection? He hissed. This is survival. This is protecting everything we've built. Jungkook shook his head, his eyes flashing with defiance. No, he replied. This is control. And I'm done being controlled. The room erupted into chaos. Executives stood, voices rising, hands slamming against tables. Namjoon stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Jungkook's shoulder, grounding him in the storm of accusations and fury. Enough. Si-hyuk's voice boomed through the room, silencing it instantly. His eyes blazed with something primal, his hands gripping the edge of the table. You think you can just walk away from this? You think you can undo everything with a few pretty words? Jungkook stepped forward, voice steady and unyielding. I don't care about the consequences, he said firmly. I'm not going to keep living a lie. Taehyung's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. And what about Jimin? He spat. Did you even think about him before you threw everything away? Do you even know where he is? What he's been through? Jungkook flinched, the words hitting like a blade. He forced himself to stand tall even as his hands shook. I'm going to find him, he said quietly. And I'm going to fix this. Taehyung's laugh was sharp and hollow. Fix this, he echoed. You think you can fix what you broke? You shattered him, Jungkook. You did that. And you think you can just glue him back together? Jungkook's fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. I have to try, he whispered, voice breaking. I have to try. The room fell silent again, the weight of his words pressing down like a shroud. Taehyung leaned back in his chair, his gaze calculating and cold. Fine, he said finally. You want to throw your career away? Be my guest. But don't expect us to pick up the pieces when it all falls apart. Jungkook didn't flinch. He just nodded, his eyes glimmering with determination. I understand, he replied simply. Namjoon's hand squeezed his shoulder, a silent show of support. Without another word, they turned and walked out of the conference room, the whispers following them like shadows. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung heavy and dark. Jungkook took a deep breath, the air crisp and sharp in his lungs. Namjoon looked at him, eyebrows raised. You really think you can fix this? He asked quietly. Jungkook met his gaze, eyes blazing with something fierce and unyielding. I have to, he replied. I don't have a choice. Namjoon nodded slowly, his eyes glimmering with something like pride. Then let's find him, he said simply. Jungkook's heart clenched, but he nodded, determination hardening his resolve. I know where he is, he whispered. Namjoon blinked, surprise flickering across his face. You do. Jungkook's eyes drifted toward the skyline, to the edge of the city where the lights were dimmer, the streets narrower. He always goes there when he's hurting, he murmured. The old dance studio. Namjoon's eyes widened. The one near Hongdae? Jungkook nodded. Yeah. He told me once, it's where he first fell in love with dancing. Said it's the only place he feels like he can breathe. Namjoon's hand slapped his back, eyes gleaming. Then let's not waste any more time, he said firmly. They climbed into the car, the engine roaring to life. As they sped through the city streets, Jungkook's heart pounded with anticipation and fear. He had no idea what he would say when he saw Jimin, if he would even listen, but he knew he had to try. As they approached the studio, the rain began to fall again, light at first, then heavier, like the sky itself was weeping. Jungkook stepped out of the car, the rain soaking through his jacket instantly, but he didn't care. He pushed open the door to the studio, his breath catching as he saw him. Jimin stood in the center of the room, headphones on, eyes closed as he moved to the rhythm of a song only he could hear. His movements were fluid, heartbreaking, every step weighted with emotion. Jungkook's breath hitched, his heart splintering. Jimin, he whispered. Jimin's eyes snapped open, his body freezing mid-step. His gaze locked with Jungkook's, surprise and pain flashing across his features. Slowly, he pulled off the headphones, the silence stretching between them. Why are you here? Jimin asked quietly, voice shaking. Jungkook stepped forward, his heart hammering. Because I need you to know, he whispered, voice cracking. I never stopped loving you. Jimin's breath hitched, his eyes glimmering with something like hope. Then why did you leave me? Jungkook swallowed hard, stepping closer. Because I was scared, he whispered. But I'm not scared anymore. The rain beat relentlessly against the windows of the old dance studio, each droplet hammering with the weight of unspoken words. The room was silent, save for the whisper of rain and the distant hum of traffic. Jimin stood frozen in the center of the room, his headphones dangling from one hand, eyes locked on Jungkook's. His breathing was shallow, chest rising and falling with the weight of emotions that threatened to spill over. Jungkook stood just inside the doorway, rainwater dripping from his jacket, pooling around his shoes. His eyes were glassy, desperation and regret etched into every line of his face. He took a tentative step forward, but Jimin flinched back, shoulders tensing. Don't, Jimin's voice was sharp, slicing through the silence. His eyes flared with something raw and jagged. Don't come any closer. Jungkook halted, hands falling to his sides, fingers flexing and curling into fists. I just want to talk, he whispered, voice cracking slightly. Please, Jimin? I need to explain. Jimin let out a sharp, bitter laugh, the sound echoing off the mirrored walls. Explain, he repeated, voice dripping with disbelief. What is there to explain, Jungkook? You left. You chose her. You made your decision. What else is there to say? Jungkook flinched, his eyes flickering with pain. It It's not what you think, he murmured, taking another step forward despite Jimin's warning. It was never about her. It was about me. About trying to be something I'm not. Jimin's fists clenched, his eyes burning with fury. And you think that makes it better? He shouted, his voice cracking with the force of his anger. You think just saying that makes it hurt any less? Jungkook took the blow, his head dropping slightly, shoulders sagging. No, he whispered. I don't think that. But I'm trying, Jimin. I'm trying to make it right. Jimin shook his head, disbelief written across his features. You can't just undo this, he spat, voice trembling. You can't just show up here and pretend like everything's fine. Jungkook's hands shook at his sides, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'm not pretending. I'm done pretending. Jimin's breath hitched, his eyes narrowing. So what is this then? He demanded, stepping forward, his voice sharp. Some grand confession? An apology? You think that's going to fix anything? Jungkook's eyes burned with desperation. I don't know, he admitted, voice raw and broken. But I had to try. Jimin stared at him, eyes glimmering with unshed tears, his chest heaving with every breath. You don't get it, he whispered, voice cracking. You don't understand what you did to me. Jungkook's heart clenched painfully, his fists clenching and unclenching. Then tell me, he urged, stepping closer. Tell me what I did. Jimin's eyes flashed with fury. You broke me, he shouted, voice shattering the stillness. You shattered everything. Everything we built, everything we were. You threw it away like it meant nothing. Jungkook's breath came in ragged bursts, his hands shaking. It wasn't nothing, he whispered fiercely, his voice shaking with the weight of his confession. It was everything. You were everything. Jimin faltered, his eyes flickering with something like disbelief. He took a shaky step back, his hand coming up to press against his chest. Then why? He whispered, voice cracking. Why did you leave me? Jungkook's eyes glistened with tears he couldn't hold back. Because I was scared, he admitted, his voice trembling. Because I was afraid of what it meant, what we meant. Jimin's fists clenched at his sides, his gaze sharpening. You were afraid, he repeated bitterly. And I was just supposed to wait? I was just supposed to sit back while you threw me away like I was disposable. Jungkook shook his head, stepping forward again. You're not disposable, he whispered, voice cracking. You're the only thing that matters. Jimin's breath hitched, his hands shaking. He looked away, blinking back tears. I can't do this again, he whispered. I can't go through that again. Jungkook's chest ached, his eyes burning. You won't have to, he promised, voice trembling. I'm not running anymore. I'm done running. Jimin looked back at him, eyes shimmering with pain and something deeper, something fragile and desperate. How do I know you won't do it again? He asked quietly. How do I know I can trust you? Jungkook stepped forward, his hands reaching out before he stopped himself, fingers curling back into fists. You don't, he whispered, voice shaking. But I'm asking you to try. I'm asking you to let me prove it to you. Jimin's gaze wavered, his hands trembling. I don't know if I can, he whispered, voice breaking. Jungkook swallowed hard, his eyes glimmering with tears. I'll wait, he promised, voice cracking. I'll wait as long as it takes. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Jimin's gaze flickered with something unreadable, his shoulders sagging slightly. You hurt me, he whispered finally, voice trembling. You broke me. Jungkook's breath hitched, his hands shaking. I know, he whispered, voice raw with regret. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it right if you let me. Jimin's eyes shimmered, his fists unclenching slowly. He took a step back, his gaze dropping to the floor. I need time, he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook nodded, his heart hammering. Take all the time you need, he replied softly. I'm not going anywhere. Jimin glanced up, his eyes shimmering with something fragile and uncertain. For a moment, something flickered between them, hope, maybe, or something even stronger. But just as quickly, Jimin looked away, his shoulders hunching slightly. I'll call you, he whispered, voice shaking. When I'm ready. Jungkook's heart clenched, his eyes burning. I'll be waiting, he promised. Jimin nodded, his eyes still on the floor. He took a step back, then another, until there was enough distance between them to breathe. He turned without another word, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Jungkook standing alone in the studio, the echo of his heartbeat the only sound in the silence. Jungkook stood there for a long time, his hands shaking, his breath coming in shallow bursts. But for the first time in weeks, there was something else, hope. It was fragile, thin as thread, but it was there. And he would hold on to it with everything he had. The rain started again, soft at first, then harder, pounding against the windows like a heartbeat. Jungkook looked up, eyes glimmering with determination. He wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, pressing down on the city like a weight too heavy to bear. Rain dripped steadily from the edges of rooftops, pooling in the cracked pavement of Seoul's backstreets. Jungkook's hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his coat as he made his way through the bustling crowd. His heart pounded with anticipation, each step carrying him closer to the one place he had avoided for weeks, HYBE's main building. It wasn't that he was afraid of facing the chaos he had caused, but rather the truth he had been running from. He stepped through the glass doors, the sterile chill of the lobby sending a shiver through him. Staff members glanced his way, whispers following him as he made his way to the elevators. He ignored them all, his focus sharp, his jaw clenched with determination. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing him in with the faint hum of machinery and the distant echo of conversations fading behind him. He watched the numbers climb, heart thundering louder with each passing floor. When it dinged at the top level, he stepped out, the hallway stretching long and empty before him. At the end of the hall, a familiar door loomed, Bang Taehyung's office. Jungkook's fists clenched at his sides as he approached, each step deliberate, every breath measured. He didn't bother knocking, he pushed the door open and stepped inside, his gaze hard and unyielding. Taehyung sat behind his desk, stacks of papers neatly organized, his eyes lifting slowly to meet Jungkook's. There was no surprise in his expression, only a raised eyebrow of mild curiosity. "I was wondering when you'd finally show up," Taehyung murmured, setting his pen down with careful precision. Jungkook stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly but his gaze steady. "We need to talk," he said, voice firm. Taehyung leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his lap. "I assumed you'd say that," he replied smoothly. "So, talk." Jungkook didn't sit. He stood firm, his eyes blazing. "I want the truth," he demanded. Taehyung's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "The truth," he repeated. "And what truth is that, Jungkook?" Jungkook's fists clenched. "The real reason for the engagement," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to know why you forced it. Why you made me do this. Because I'm done pretending it was my choice." Taehyung's smile was sharp, almost predatory. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "You want the truth?" he asked, voice dripping with condescension. "Fine. But I promise you won't like it." Jungkook didn't flinch. He stood tall, chin raised. "I'm not afraid," he replied. Taehyung chuckled, shaking his head. "You should be," he murmured. "Because the truth is, this wasn't about you. It never was. It was about control. About image. About saving something that was slipping through our fingers." Jungkook's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. Taehyung rose from his chair, hands clasped behind his back as he walked toward the window. He stared out over the city, rain streaking down the glass-like rivers of regret. "Our numbers have been slipping for months," he said calmly. "Streaming, sales, international presence. You think the world revolves around your happiness? It doesn't. It revolves around survival. And we needed something big. Something that would get everyone talking." Jungkook's hands shook, rage simmering beneath his skin. "So you used me?" he whispered, voice cracking. "You used me and her to sell some fucking story?" Taehyung turned, his expression hardening. "We saved you," he snapped. "Your reputation was slipping. The rumors, the whispers. You think people didn't notice? The late nights, the missed schedules? You were unraveling and we tied you back together." Jungkook staggered back a step, the weight of the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. You forced me," he whispered, disbelief flashing across his face. "You threatened me. You told me if I didn't go through with it, everything would fall apart." Taehyung's gaze was unyielding. "And it would have," he replied. "You're good, Jungkook. But you're not invincible. You needed structure. You needed discipline. And you needed an image that wouldn't send our stocks plummeting." Jungkook's eyes blazed with fury. "You used her," he spat. "You used both of us for your own agenda." Taehyung's smile was sharp and unrepentant. "That's business," he replied smoothly. "We do what we must to survive. You, of all people, should understand that." Jungkook's fists shook, rage flooding through his veins. "You lied to me," he whispered. "You manipulated me." Taehyung's gaze didn't waver. "I did what I had to do," he said firmly. "And now you will too. You're going to go through with the engagement, you're going to smile for the cameras, and you're going to keep that pretty face of yours plastered on every billboard from here to New York. Do you understand me?" Jungkook's breath came in sharp bursts, his vision blurring with rage and disbelief. "No," he whispered, voice trembling. "I won't do it." Taehyung's smile vanished, his eyes darkening. "I don't think you understand," he said slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This isn't a choice. You signed the contract. You agreed. And if you back out now, you won't just be ruining your career. You'll be dragging everyone else down with you. Your members, your friends, even Jimin." Jungkook's eyes flared with fury. "Leave him out of this," he snarled. Taehyung's smile returned, sharp and cruel. "I can't do that," he replied calmly. "Because he's already in it. He's always been in it. And if you think for a second that I won't use him to control you, you're more naive than I thought. Jungkook's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind raced, rage and despair crashing over him like waves. But amidst the storm, there was clarity, a decision crystallizing in his mind. "No," Jungkook said, his voice firm, steady. "I'm done. I'm done with your contracts, your manipulation, all of it." Taehyung's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. "You walk away now and you take everyone with you," he whispered. "Do you really want that on your conscience?" Jungkook stepped forward, eyes blazing. "If I stay," he murmured, voice trembling with conviction, "I lose everything that matters. And I won't let you take him from me. Not again." Taehyung's jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. "You'll regret this," he spat. Jungkook's smile was sharp, fierce. "No," he replied quietly. "I regret waiting this long." He turned on his heel, pushing the door open with enough force that it slammed against the wall. He didn't look back, didn't pause to think. His heart thundered in his chest, adrenaline flooding his veins. He was going to find Jimin. He was going to tell him everything. And this time he wouldn't let go. The rain was relentless, hammering against the glass panes of the taxi window as it sped through the slick streets of Seoul. Neon lights blurred into streaks of color, reflecting off the puddles that gathered at every corner. Jungkook's hands were clenched into fists on his lap, knuckles white with tension. His jaw was set, eyes fixed out the window as buildings and familiar landmarks streaked by in flashes of light and shadow. His mind raced, heart pounding with every beat. Taehyung's words echoed in his ears, sharp and cutting. "If you think for a second that I won't use him to control you, you're more naive than I thought." The threat had been real, tangible. He had seen it in the cold glimmer of Taehyung's eyes, the promise of ruin, of destruction. Not just for him, but for Jimin. For all of them. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. The taxi came to a jerking halt outside the dance studio. Jungkook thrust a handful of bills into the driver's hands, not waiting for change, and burst into the rain-soaked street. His shoes splashed through puddles as he sprinted toward the entrance, heart hammering in his chest. He didn't know if Jimin would be there. He hadn't answered his calls, hadn't returned his messages. But Jungkook knew this place. It was Jimin's sanctuary, the only place he could breathe when the world grew too heavy. The door creaked as Jungkook pushed it open, the familiar scent of wood polish and old vinyl flooding his senses. The studio was dark, only the faint glow of city lights filtering through the windows. He took a breath, his heart still pounding, and stepped inside, the echo of his footsteps bouncing off the walls. "Jimin?" His voice broke the silence, fragile and uncertain. "Are you here?" There was no answer. Just the hollow echo of his own voice, stretching out and fading into the dark corners of the room. Jungkook swallowed hard, fists clenching. He stepped further inside, the floorboards creaking under his weight. "Jimin." His voice was louder this time, desperation threading through the syllables. He spun around, eyes searching the shadows. "Please, just come out. I need to talk to you." A soft shuffle came from the back of the room, a whisper of movement. Jungkook's breath hitched, his eyes snapping toward the sound. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed red, hair tousled as if he hadn't slept in days. Jimin stepped forward, the light catching his face just enough to reveal the exhaustion etched into his features. His eyes met Jungkook's, guarded and wary. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice rough and brittle. Jungkook took a shaky breath, his hands falling to his sides. "I came to tell you the truth," he whispered. "About everything." Jimin's eyes flickered with something, hope, maybe, or distrust. He crossed his arms over his chest, leaning back against the mirrored wall. "The truth," he repeated, voice dripping with skepticism. "That's new." Jungkook flinched but held his ground. "I mean it," he insisted, stepping closer. "Everything that's happened, it wasn't real. The engagement, the pictures, all of it, it was orchestrated." Jimin's eyes narrowed, his arms tightening across his chest. "By who?" Jungkook's hands shook, but he forced his voice to stay steady. "By Taehyung," he replied. "The whole thing, it was his idea. He said it was to save the company, to fix our image. He told me if I didn't go along with it, he would ruin everything. He threatened you, Jimin?" Jimin's expression faltered, his arms dropping slightly. He threatened me?" His voice was soft, disbelieving. Jungkook nodded, stepping even closer. "He said if I didn't go through with it, he'd use you to control me. That he'd ruin you, ruin us. I couldn't let that happen." Jimin's eyes shimmered with something raw and painful. "So you just left me?" he whispered, voice cracking. "You didn't even tell me. You just walked away." Jungkook's breath hitched, his fists clenching at his sides. "I didn't know how," he whispered. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I did what he wanted, you'd be safe." Jimin's fists unclenched, his shoulders sagging. "I wasn't safe," he whispered. I was broken." Jungkook took another step forward, his hands shaking. I'm sorry, he murmured, voice cracking. I'm so sorry, Jimin. I was trying to protect you, but I was wrong. I should have fought for you. For us. Jimin's eyes shone with unshed tears, his gaze dropping to the floor. Why now? He asked, voice trembling. Why come back now? Jungkook hesitated, his throat tightening. Because I'm not afraid anymore, he replied softly. I'm done letting him control me. Control us. I'm done pretending I don't. Jimin looked up, eyes wide and glassy. Don't what? He whispered. Jungkook swallowed hard, his heart slamming against his ribs. I'm done pretending I don't love you, he whispered, voice cracking with the force of the confession. I love you, Jimin. I always have. The silence that followed was deafening. Jimin's breath came in ragged bursts, his hands shaking. He blinked rapidly as if trying to process the words. You. Jungkook stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I love you, he repeated, voice firm and steady. And I'm not going to lose you again. Jimin's gaze softened, his eyes shimmering with emotion. You mean that? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jungkook nodded, his eyes shining. I mean it, he replied. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I choose you. Always. A tear slipped down Jimin's cheek, his hands trembling. He reached up, brushing it away hastily. You have no idea how long I've waited to hear you say that, he whispered, voice cracking. Jungkook's heart clenched, his hands reaching out to cup Jimin's face. I'm so sorry, he whispered. For everything. But I swear. I'm going to make it right. Jimin's eyes flickered with hope, his hands coming up to grip Jungkook's wrists. Promise, he whispered. Jungkook's gaze was steady, unwavering. I promise, he whispered back. For a moment, the world fell away. There was no rain, no city, no company waiting to tear them apart. There was only them, broken, mending, and real. Jungkook stepped forward, pressing his forehead to Jimin's, their breaths mingling in the space between them. We fight this, Jungkook whispered, voice shaking. Together. Jimin nodded, his eyes closing. Together, he whispered back. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside, something shifted. A promise. A vow. A beginning.